Welcome to the sixth episode of Mortal Musings, the chronicle of my thoughts and feelings as I battling stage 4 cancer. This is the second day after the elections, and you know, the only thing I'll say is that it seems like my cancer may have spread to the country as a whole. But I remain optimistic, even though I may have been very disappointed in the results. Again, I won't speak much of that anymore, except to the extent that I remain optimistic. And just like my own personal battles, it is my, I guess you say, my core faith that has always led me to remain optimistic. And that's what I really want to talk about in this episode. This episode is extremely personal. It's difficult for me to talk about it because it's something that I really haven't shared with anybody, with the slight exception of my son, who we've had the most conversations about. But I really don't talk about my relationship with God or my faith. I try not to share my opinions on politics or other things because I don't like imposing them. But today I want to talk to you not about politics, but about God and the roller coaster relationship I've had with God all my life. But it's natural, I think, that when you're facing the very real possibility of your own mortality coming way, way sooner than you expected, that you turn to faith and you turn to God. And many times it's to shake your fist and say, why me? Why are we going through this? Why am I having to suffer? The truth is we all end up going through this. And as they also say, there's no atheist in a foxhole. And by golly, I'm in a pretty big foxhole. Throughout my life, God and I have had a roller coaster relationship, I guess you could say. Actually, my life has been a roller coaster. And I have felt God's presence throughout that in multiple ways, to the point where we talk about belief and faith in God, and I kind of reject that because to me, belief implies that there's doubt, that you're believing beyond evidence, or you have faith in something that you cannot see, touch, or feel. But I don't feel that way. To me, God is a reality just as much as I am breathing air or seeing the camera in front of me. God is real. So I don't call it a belief in God. I call it an awareness. This has not always been the case with me. When I was younger, I was a product of the 60s and 70s. There was a long period of time through high school and college where I would consider myself an agnostic. I didn't say there wasn't a God, but neither did I totally commit to it. And part of that was the fact that the church, any given church, didn't make a lot of sense to me. I was not a big believer in church, and that's because I have always felt from the very beginning that no church had a monopoly on God. Every one of them claimed that they were the answer, that they were the one and only true religion. And I kept asking myself, that made no sense. You're saying that you alone have the answer and all these other billions of people are wrong. But those people and their church, their faith, all believe they're right. How can that be? That can't be. It did not make sense to me. It wasn't logical. And I've always prided myself in logic. And of course, I wanted to be a scientist all the way up to college. Part of it, too, was my background. My parents came from complete opposites ends of the earth and opposite backgrounds. My father was born and raised in a one-room house that he shared with 4 brothers and sisters and 2 parents. that was located a mile outside Protection, Kansas, 700 people, which is 120 miles from the nearest city, Wichita, Kansas. So very rural. He was raised Southern Baptist. My mother, on the other hand, was born and raised to an upper crust family in the largest city in the world at the time, London, England. Her father was a rather noted restaurateur and hotelier who literally entertained the king and queen. And they were Jewish. So I'm legally Jewish from the Jewish tradition because my mother was Jewish. But neither of my parents had a strong religious bent. But they did feel that having some religious structure to their kids was important. So they raised us to be Unitarians. They took us to the Unitarian Church, which kind of echoed my own beliefs that there is no one true church out there, but we can take parts of all of these religions to gain a better understanding of what God is all about. And I did embrace it, and I still embrace a lot of that concept. But back to my roller coaster relationship. My whole life has been cyclic, and I know that that's true with most people. They go through severe cycles where, you're up one year, you're down the next year. My cycles seem to be perhaps a little bit more dramatic in nature, and they're pretty regular. It's almost exactly 1 year up, 1 year down. But what is particularly significant to me is that how they change, when they peak and when they turn cycles, especially the big cycles, the big changes in my life, have come out of nowhere. They're the reasons behind the changes has always been something that was way out of my control, way out of, in many cases, totally unexpected, and dealing with things that are just flat out strange. So let me tell you just a few of the stories about the roller coasters so you can kind of see where I'm coming from. First big roller coaster dip happened in 7th grade, first year junior high. And grade school was a pretty happy time for me. I developed a lot of close friends that I still maintain today. In fact, my 2 best friends come from grade school. But 7th grade was different. That was junior high was a horrible time for me, as it is for most people. But for me in particular, it was horrific. I had real bad buck teeth, so the worst case, my orthodontist, who was the busiest practice in Kansas City at the time, worst case he told me he had. So I was wearing braces, but I still had awful teeth, and it was called beaver, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I went home crying most nights. But what really tore me up was when my best friend Jeff moved to Indianapolis. That was my security blanket. And when he left, it was like a real gut wrench. And things kind of went downhill for me thereafter. Got so bad that my parents ended up pulling me out of public school in 9th grade, and even though they really couldn't afford the private school. And that probably saved me. Another example happened in college. As I said, when I started at KU, my full intention was to be a scientist. And astronomy or physics were my biggest interests. So, of course, to do that, you had to be really good at math. Well, I'd always been really good at math. But the first course that I had to take was calculus. Now, when I went into, I took calculus in high school, but it was a joke. I mean, we had the worst teacher, I think, in the history of math. He was one of the football coaches, and he didn't care a hoot and holler about teaching us math, and he had absolutely no control over the class. So as an example, when we had a test, and this is absolutely true, we had a couple of geniuses in our class, verifiable geniuses, and they would do the tests, and they'd do the test in about 5 minutes, and then their test papers would make it around the entire class, and we we weren't shy about it. We would just copy the answers. So in short, even though I may have gotten A's in that class, I really didn't learn a whole lot. So when we got to college, I had a choice. I could start with Calculus 2, but I knew I wasn't ready for that. So I thought, well, there's this honors calculus, so I figured that would be kind of a review. It'd probably be an easy course because at least I'd taken that calculus before, and I would, I felt it would give me the background that I needed. I knew I was in trouble the first day of class when my calculus professor walked in with a cane, a white, long cane. My math teacher was completely blind, Dr. Salinas, bless his heart. And he was incredible because he was able to do all these calculus things in his head. But the problem is that when he tried to write things on the blackboard or on the projector, you couldn't read anything he wrote. I mean, he may have tried, but you couldn't read it. But the thing was, that wasn't his worst handicap. The worst handicap was he was from Argentina, and he spoke with an incredibly heavy accent. So you couldn't understand him either. So you not only couldn't see what he was writing, but you couldn't understand what he was trying to teach. So all of a sudden I find myself in a self-teaching, in a class where I'm going to have to do everything myself. Well, being a stupid idiot, in my freshman year, I was taking 20 hours of classes. So because I was expecting this to be a PUD course, well, obviously I was very wrong. Then I discovered that, calculus has two different ways of being taught. You can taught by differentiation, or you can teach it from integration. Well, in high school, we did it one way, which I think was integration, but he was teaching it a different way, which was completely different. So any background that I would have retained from high school really didn't apply. So here I'm in an honors class trying to teach myself calculus from scratch while I'm taking 20 hours. Well, bottom line is that was the end of my math, and that was the end of my science, hard science career, because I dropped the class, and I never went back. And even though my sciences, I continued to take sciences, it wasn't until I took statistics for psychology that I realized, whoa, psychology is a real science. And that's how I ended up going to graduate school in psychology. But that's kind of an example of how can you foresee that your teacher, that you're planning on this one career path, and then you get literally blindsided. So let's fast forward. Now I'm in psychology. I'm doing well in graduate school, and here's my career path. I'm going to be a college professor. That's what I wanted to do. And I was teaching courses in parapsychology, which is the scientific study of ESP. I was the first person to teach that course at the University of Kansas. And I loved teaching. I mean, that was one of the happiest periods of my life, was teaching. I enjoyed the heck out of it. So here comes another unexpected turn. I was in what's called experimental psychology, and the department head came to me, and this was my third year, and he said, John, we need your help. We have this research fellowship that, like as government contracts tend to work, if we don't have someone take it, they'll forever lose that money. So they asked me to take one on the chin, basically, and give up my teaching, which I loved, to take this research fellowship that, saved the department the money. So I did one for the team, but I was not happy, because I didn't have that outlet that I loved, which was teaching. But I had to work on my dissertation. So anyway, that threw me into an unexpected place. Enter my good friend Greg. We're sitting at where all these great business decisions are made. We were having breakfast at Burger King, and he was in theology. He was working on his master's degree there. I had just completed my master's in psychology, and we were kind of lamenting the structural needs that get you through a master's degree. This, you have to remember, was in the 70s, way before the era of the personal computer. Personal computers didn't exist. The computers that existed, you had to use, these cards and write programs on these cards that went into the card reader. It was a whole different technology world, very backwards. So if you were doing your master's thesis, you were typing it. And kids, back then, we're talking, at best you had a typewriter that had a correct button that would allow you to go back and white out the previous sentence. And that's only if you had an expensive $500 typewriter. And they didn't have memories. The typewriters had no memory at all. You just typed and physically go back and correct your errors. So the process of writing even your rough draft was a huge exercise, because you had to write draft after draft after draft, and each draft you're starting from scratch. You're writing, literally typing every word every time. And that's a real pain. Then when you're ready to present the thesis, unless you were an expert typist, which almost none of us are, you had to find a professional typist to do it so that the final copy would be error-free, or even the final draft would be error-free of typos and all the little nitpicky things. Then after you get it typed and approved, you had to find a printer who will print you multiple copies of it, and then find a binder to bind it. So Greg and I came up with the idea, once if you put all of those services under one roof. You had a copy shop that would do more than just make copies, but it would also provide typing services and also printing and binding services. So that's how we came up with the idea for Encore Copy Corps. Now, back in those days, I had no business, neither of us had any business experience. Our business experience was cutting through Summerfield Hall, to get to wherever we wanted to go to on campus. And our experience in the copying industry was standing in line at Kinko's. And the other key thing that you needed for business was money. Well, we were graduate students by definition. We were flat broke. But somehow the idea captured my imagination. And so, I was in that place where, the teaching was taken away from me, so I had a hole to fill. And this filled that hole. So I went out and I talked to college professors in business school, and they told me, well, you need to write a business plan. I said, what's a business plan? And, they told me, and they gave me examples. So I created a business plan, raised the money, and lo and behold, I started a business with Greg called Encore Copy Corps. And it took off. We were doing very well. I mean, we were getting a great reputation. But of course, we opened in the worst year in our country's history for opening a business, 1980, when prime rates was in the high teens, and your business loans was in the 20% range. I think we were paying 23% on our equipment leases. I mean, astronomical debt financing, and which we had to do because we didn't raise nearly enough money. So, you know, but we were doing it. We were being successful. And I was loving it because we were, I was finding a whole new world out there that I had no idea about. And I was doing all the advertising, and I was having fun with that and being creative. And all of a sudden, I was putting in literally 100-hour work weeks, and I had always thought I was lazy. And, you know, because through college, I never put in 100-hour weeks. I never put in a 40-hour week. You know, things came pretty easy for me, so I never had to work hard. But here I was working hard and loving it. Then the unexpected again occurred, and we found somebody else saw what we were doing and said, hey, that's a great idea. And unlike us, they had more money than God, and certainly more money than they had sense. Because when we opened, we looked at the market and said, well, you know, our competitors, House of Usher and Kinko's, were downtown Lawrence, so why don't we locate on the opposite side of town, on the other side of campus? So we had our location going for us. This idiot said, well, you know, I like downtown, so I'm going to open a shop right middle, halfway between House of Usher and Kinko's. What a schmuck. So, you know, House of Usher and Kinko's aren't going to stand for a competitor right down 2 doors down from them. So that precipitated a copy war that literally drove the price of copying below cost. So we were losing money literally every time someone bought something from us. It didn't take me long to figure out that when you're losing money on a per copy basis, that you can't make it up with volume. You're just losing even more money. So we kind of pulled out of the price war thing, but it was too late. They did drive that guy out of business in 6 months, and it took another 1.5 years for us to finally succumb. But when you're paying 24% debt, and you're just not, you know, we were operationally profitable. We were making money covering our operating costs. We just couldn't make enough to cover that massive debt that just kept multiplying. So that was how I ended up getting into the business world. What happened to me when I had that business that really proved God's existence to me. Well, the first incident alone didn't do it. But we were very tight, you know, we had no money. And I had learned the hard way, I think, early on. We didn't have enough cash to make payroll on payday, and so I was a day late. And I didn't think it was any big deal, but boy, my employees let me know this was a huge deal to them because they had bills and everything else. So I swore I would never be late on payroll again. But as it would happen, about a month later, again, we didn't have enough money to make payroll. We were $110 short of making payroll. And I didn't have that money. I didn't know where I could get it, you know, because here we are, the paychecks were due the next day, and I was short $110. How am I going to make it up? That night, I was doing my laundry, and I was living in an apartment, and I had my own washing machine. I was down in the basement, and I had bought this washing machine used, of course, but I'd had it for 2 years. And for some reason, when I was doing the wash, the top of the what you call it, the spinner thingy. But anyway, I noticed it was loose. And so so I took it off to put it back. And underneath it was a gold ring. It wasn't my ring. I'd never seen it before, and it certainly wasn't anything in my clothes, and I was the only one living there. Where'd this ring come from? But, I looked at it and says, well, this looks to be real gold. So I go down in the morning and take it to a pawn shop, and guess how much it was worth? $110. And I made my payroll. And that was the first moment that I had where I said, hey, this is beyond a coincidence. Something real happened here. So being the scientist, I'm thinking, well, if this isn't God, I don't know what would be. But still, I wanted the absolute proof. So I'm driving down the highway, and I see, a bunch of little puffy clouds in the sky. And I said, okay. I challenged God. I said, I'm going to pick a cloud. And if it disappears, and none of the others do, then you got me. I'll believe it. So I picked a cloud, just random. I picked a single cloud out of a sky of little fluffy clouds, and I looked at that cloud, and sure enough, over the course of maybe 30 seconds, it disappeared, alone. The clouds around it, and I was watching carefully. None of the other clouds disappeared, just the one that I had picked. So, being the say, okay, well, this happened once, could be coincidence. Let me try it again. And same thing happened. So when I take those things combined, I realized, hey, there's something real here. This is beyond coincidence. This is real. This is God telling me, hey, I'm here. After the incident with the ring and everything else, it once again kind of renewed my faith that, maybe not only is there God, but he has a plan for me. And I would have no idea what that plan is, and I still don't. But nonetheless, I knew and have had this confidence or faith that no matter what happens to me, there's a reason for it. And so as I've gone through these cycles, and I've had some horrible, bad downturns, I've gone through bankruptcy, I think 4 times now. I've had some bad stuff happen to me. But through it all, I've always knew that it would turn around, because it always did. I always had faith that, I'm at a down cycle. It's going to turn around. And at the same time, when things are going good, I realize, this isn't going to last. It's not going to be like this forever. And sure enough, it does turn around. And again, almost always it's because of something that I can't foresee, whether it's a business thing or a personal thing or what have you. It's always been that way. So fast forward to the events that have happened more recently, surrounding my move to Georgia. Moved here last August, and shortly after moving here, everything looked great. My wife had a fantastic job. We had found a house that we were renting with a contract to purchase, and I was doing well, and we had our house in Corsicana under contract with them renting it just like we were. So financially things were set. Then I started suffering all these medical issues, not related to the cancer at that point, but I was having all sorts of back and neck problems that resulted from the physical aspects of the move that put me in serious issues. But then we had the nice little outside interference that comes in, again, can't explain. And that happened in October when, we're rolling along fine. Our buyers are looking to close earlier than we had expected, which was March. And then the skies opened, literally. And our house in Corsicana received 23 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, 28 inches of rain over a 2-day period. Now, to put that in perspective, I'm in Columbus, Georgia. We have had 28 inches of rain for the entire year. So, and 28 inches of rain in Corsicana is basically just about an inch or two under their annual rainfall total. We had this in one weekend. Well, bottom line is, that the storm, this massive storm, created some leaks in the roof, and the buyers freaked. They just, the wife did anyway. She just literally freaked on it, and they ended up canceling the contract. They canceled the lease. They canceled the contract. So now all of a sudden, we were in bad doo-doo because that house costs about $3,000 a month to, with a lease, and we got 3 acres to maintain, and utility costs are high. So that went from good to horrible overnight. Plus we had to fix all the problems and do all the repairs. At the same time, we put some more money into it to put in new appliances. Insurance covered most of it, but not all of it, which is, fortunate we had good insurance. But fast forward to this summer when I started having the medical problems with the pain. By the end of June, we were in serious financial trouble. Having that extra burden of the house in Corsicana, plus our house here in Columbus, plus all the medical bills that I was racking up, and Holly had her share, and all these other things added up to where we were fast approaching. We'd wiped out our savings. We'd gotten a loan from the FDA, and we were about through running through that. Of course, Corsicana had been declared a disaster area, so we were able to get some money from them. But that was gone. So by the end of the June, we were in serious doo-doo. Then all of a sudden, things changed again. I got the management contract all in 1 week. We got the management contract on Southern Hills, and we got the house under contract again. We were able to find a much, much nicer house for basically the same price as what we were going to pay for the house we had been living in. So in the space of 1 week, everything changed, and we went from gloomy to bright and shiny. Again, unexpected. Coincidentally or not, that was the same week that I had the CT scan from a urologist that he told me was negative. And it's turned out 3 months later that when we look back at that CT scan, that in fact the cancer was visible then. So I could have had the treatment started 3 months ago, and we may have been able to prevent it from spreading as much as it has. So that 1 week was quite a decision, I guess. It was a turning point in everything. We just didn't appreciate the good and bad that happened at the same time. So now here we are. And I am looking at the future, and I remain confident that I'm in good hands. I don't know what the future lies. I don't know what God has planned for me. How can you? I think that's, every time I try to guess, every time I try to anticipate the future, it gets turned around, and all I can do is prepare as best I can for whatever might come. But I do know that there is a plan, and I do know that whatever happens, that there's a reason for it to happen. And that's what gives me hope. That's what gives me confidence that no matter what, it's all part of a much, much bigger plan than I can imagine. And that alone gives me comfort.